Hello and welcome to a new Java video. In the previous video, we spoke about the part 1 of the basic concepts in Java, which includes the hello world, comments, and escape sequence. In this video, I'll be talking about variables and strings. So if you haven't watched the first video, the link will be in the description, and maybe you can check the top up here. You see the link to watch the first video. Then from there, move on to the variables and string. So today's video will be about variables and string. And after this first part of the video, I place a challenge that we will all be trying here, and the challenge is a time converter. So you write a program that converts days to seconds. The program will accept a day and output the number of seconds in that day. So make sure you watch all the first parts to the fourth part of this video before you'll be able to solve this challenge. And if you're able to do it, you can leave your answer in the description, or in the comment section, or you can send it to me right on WhatsApp. I'll drop my WhatsApp link in the description for you, and I'll be glad to go through your project and assess you for that. If you have any problem, you can give it in the comment section below, and I'll take care of that as soon as possible. So today we'll be talking about variables in Java. Now when you talk about variables, what variables are is simply a container used to store values, and it behaves like the value stored in it. So let's say you want to store your name and you want to use the name later. You can't just stand up in Java and write my name is so and so. No, you have to store the name in a variable, and the name will take a space in your memory, that's your hard drive, and that memory has to be allocated first before you store any value you want to store in it. So later in your program, you just use the variable to call back that name. For example, in junior high school and elementary schools, we learn and we solve the value of x, always value of x. So x in this case is a variable, and x is holding a value. Whenever you need that value, when you call x, that value will be responded. So let's look at that. Now for the space in memory, we have what you call the data type, and this data type is what holds the value that you are storing. So you have the first one, which is byte, and the size is 1 bit, and it's a primitive data type. So we have two types of data types. They are the primitive data types and the reference or abstract data types. They are classified into two. A byte here in this case is a primitive data type, which is simple, a primary data types, and it stores values in between -128 to +128. Above this number, a byte cannot take it anymore, so a bit has to take over. A short has to take over, and short is 2 bytes bigger than, it's 2 bytes and it's 1 byte bigger than this, and it's also a primitive data types. It stores larger values from -132,000 to -32,000 to +32,000. Now after short, we have int, and int stores 4 bytes, or takes 4 bytes in memory, and it's also a primitive data types. It stores values from -2 billion to +2 billion, and you can see that the int here is highlighted, it's in a bold letter, because it is one of the most used data types in Java. So if you see the highlighted ones, I'll pay more attention to them because they are the most used data types. Now after the int, if the value is bigger than 2 billion, then a long will take over, and a long is 8 bytes, and it takes a very large millions and quadrillions or whatever amount of numbers. Then after a long, we have a boolean, and boolean is responsible for taking two values, either true or false. So its size is only 1 bit. So if the value is not true, it's false, just like how we have yes or no. If not yes, then it's no, and it's also primitive data types. Now we can continue here by floats. Now float is used to store decimal numbers. It has 4 bytes in memory, and it's also primitive data types, which take fractional numbers up to only 6 digits. If it is greater than 6 digits, a float can't take it anymore. Then double has to take place. So since double is bigger than the float, we make more use of double, and the default data type which is used to store variables with decimal characters is double. when you have to use a float, there's a different conversion that will look when we get inside the code. Then the next one we'll talk about is the character, which is char for short. So char has 2 bytes in memory and stores single characters A, B, or you can store symbols such as the @, $sign, modulo sign, and many more. Now the string in this case is different from all of them. It is a reference data types and its size varies. So it stores sequence of characters. It can store sequence of numbers, sequence of characters. Maybe you want to type your name or you want to print your name. A string is responsible for that, but it is a reference data types, and the reason why it is different from them will be well treated in the course. That's why I splitted it into 2 variables and strings on its own. So here is what we have, and let's get started. Now let's take a look at this example. How to declare a variable. Now you have 2 things. You have declaration and initialization. Declaration, initialization, and declaration only. So let's say you want to give a value to your age. So we first start by typing int age is equal to 12. You can see in this case we give the age a value directly, but in other case you can decide to declare a variable age. Later on you give it a value of whatever you want. That's called only declaration. So when you do this int age and you end it by a semicolon, you've done only a declaration. But if you went ahead to give a value to it, it is called initialization in Java. So let's quickly jump into the code. So we are here in my IntelliJ terminal. Now I've already created a project and I name it main. So it's still a basic concept. So if to do that, you just come to file, new project, click on next, then you give it a project name. So you can name it basic concept. Now I already have it, so I won't click OK. So let's cancel it, and after that you create your package and your main class as well as your main method. So now let's start writing some code. Now the other time we talk about comments, so I'll start by giving a comment. So let's say this is how a var in Java. So all the variables we spoke about, all the primitive variables that I talk about, start in small letters, not in capital letters, in small letters. So let's start by writing the first one, which is a byte. Now we said a byte stores values from -127 to -128 to +127. So let's give it a byte and let's see age is equal to, so let's give it a value like 23. Then we've done what we call initialization. So let's say this is initialization. Now let's try giving it a value bigger than 127. So let's put 3 here. So you can see that it gives a word warning which says that required byte and we provided an int. So this is an integer value since it exceeded the -100 and the +127. And for storing whole numbers, you can see I highlighted int in the previous slide that I shared. So the int is the default use variable for storing whole numbers. So to do that, let's take off this here and let's give this int, and let's see salary is equal to 34500. and you hit the semicolon. So you can see that it doesn't give any error simply because this is the range in which we have to store it. You can put negative here, the same thing is done. That's for int. Now let's try something here. Long, and let's say you want to store a very huge salary or a very huge number. So let's say your net worth, let's give it a very huge number. So let's hover over this. It gives an error and it says that integer number is too large, simply because the default is integer and the compiler assumes you are trying to type an integer, although we brought a long here. So to do that, at the end we add capital L or small l, and this shows that it is a long. But let's use the capital L to make it not to look like 1. Now the number is too large, so we can separate it by simply bringing the underscore sign. So I think this way is okay. It can be well read and well understood. Now from there, let's move to the next one. So the next major important one that we'll talk about here is the boolean. So boolean, and let's say is male, is equal to, so you can store in two values, true, or if you don't want to store this one, you can use the false. Either ways, it works for only true and false. Now the next one we'll talk about here is character, and character, let's say a sign, and it's equal to, so let's store this value in it. Now when storing characters, we store it in just a single quote. If you store the character just like that, it gives an error. It detects it that maybe you want to do something that you haven't completed. Then if you store it in a double character, in a double quote, it also gives an error because it reads this to be a string. Since it's in a double quote, it should be a string, but the declaration here is a character. So let's change this to a single quote. So let's highlight it. Okay, so now our error is gone. Now the last one that we'll talk about is string name, and let's say name is John. Alright, so our string is also declared. Now if you take a look at the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, they are all in a highlighted orange color, I see, but the string here is different, and you can see it is only the string that's starting with a capital letter. The reason is because I said earlier that it's not a primitive data type, but rather a reference data type, and the reason because it's a reference data type will be said shortly. So let's look at this. So this is our data type, and this is now our variable. So we can say the name of the variable, and the variable itself is this. So the variable is 33, and it is stored in a variable name called age. And you can see that I'm using meaningful names here. Some people just use byte a, int v. Some point in time you might forget what the v stands for, but in this case we use meaningful names to store them so that when someone says it, it can be well read. Now when combining two words, we don't use capital letters to start. Usually we use small letters, and when you are bringing a new word, let's say you are combining two words, if you give it this, it is underlined because this is not a word in a dictionary. So to do that, you can start with a capital letter, or in other words, you can use an underscore to differentiate between them. So this is how variables are declared in Java. Now if you want to make use of those variables later and you want to print the age back, what you do is system.out.print, and in the print statement you don't bring the quotes, you just type the name of the variable directly. And let's run this. So we have our age printed for us down in the console. Let's go ahead to do that for other variables as well. So let's see salary, net worth, is male. Sorry. Then let's say sign. Then let's have the name here. So let's print all of them. So we have everything well printed for us on our console, but in this case the demarcation we place here isn't printed here, just because it's just for a clear understanding and a clear view of this. So this is how variables are declared in Java. Now let's take a quick look at something before we move on to string. So let's say age. You will later want to change the age. So what you just do is age is equal to, then you give it the new value that you want to. You don't have to go back and change the first one or declare a new name for age. You just write age is equal to and you write the new age. So let's say salary is equal to, let's give it another value. Then let's say net worth is equal to, let's give it also another value. And let's say is male is now true. So these ones are okay. Now let's comment this. So let's print this and see. So as you can see here, the first integer value we declared is 33. At this time around is 40 here because we later changed it. The next one is salary. The salary here was a negative value, but this time around is a positive. The same for the net worth and the is male. The first one was false, but this time around is true. So you can later change the variables in your code. Now let's move on to string at last now. Now the reason why string is not a primitive data type but rather a reference data type is because it has a lot of abstract methods in it which can be later used. So let's take a string here. String name is equal to John. Then let's say string last name is equal to, so let's say something like Mike. Now let's comment all these codes. Now this is what we can do. When you type the string value, which is the variable name, name, and you hit the dot sign, you can see a whole lot of methods down here. So these methods are the abstract values hidden in a string and can be used later. So let's say we want to do this to uppercase, so you have the dot to uppercase, and let's print this inside a printout statement. So I'm going to cut this off and let's print it inside. So let's say name dot to uppercase, which is John dot to uppercase. So what this will do is to capitalize all the value of John into an uppercase. We can move ahead to do that. So name dot to lowercase, let's use the second one. When you hit on the enter key, you can see that, sorry, we use uppercase again. That's not what we want. We want to lowercase. So let's run our program now. So we now have everything in small letters. Now you can also use other useful methods in there. So let's say name, and we want a character at an index position. I'll be talking about more about index in the course. So let's say the character at index position, and you give it an integer value of 3. So that means to read John, the first value is 0, the second index is 1, the third one is 2, and the fourth index is 3. So it starts counting from 0, 1, 2, 3. So the value at position 3 is n. Don't worry about that. In later videos I'll be talking more about indexing when we get to arrays and conditional loops. Now let's look at other methods too. Name dot Now let's look at the concat. What concat does is simply adding two strings together, or a concat can add a string to an integer. So let's look at this. Let's add the name to the last name. So let's print here last name, and let's run the program and see. So it joins John and Mike automatically. So it concatenates John to Mike to give us John Mike. Now let's look at the last one here. We'll be talking about more of them, so don't worry. When we get into details, you'll be seeing how the methods are used. So let's see. Hello. Then you bring a plus sign. Then you write name. So what this will do is that it will print hello, give it a space, then go back to get the variable that is stored inside a name and print it in addition to this. So let's run this and see. So we now have hello John printed down below here. So we can go ahead to say you are age, and bring plus again if you want to continue. Yes, old. So let's run our program and see. So we have hello John, you are 40 years old. So let's come back here and see. So you can see our age here. We typed in 40, so 40 is displayed on the screen for us. Now I forgot one thing, storing decimals. Now I talk about the first one to be of a float. Now a float, let's say a float storing height is equal to 12 points, any number at all. Now when you do this, it gives an error simply because they said required type float provided is double. What you provided here by default IntelliJ reads it as a double, but we want it to be a float. So what we do is just similar to what we did for the long. Since it is float, we hit capital F at the end of the value, and this time around we have our float. Then for double, sorry, so let's say double weight is equal to 12 points, unless it's a big number. Now for double we don't have any problem, so since it is the default data type used to store decimals, you just bring double and weight and give in the value, then your program will run successfully. So let's try printing it out. So let's see, you weigh then let's give in weight here, and you are, and let's give the height here. Tall. Now you can see before I bring the concatenation here, I bring a space, and before here there is a space. Then I have to bring a space here too to make the code well organized. So let's run this thing and see. So you have hello John, you are 40 years old, you weigh 12, and you are so and so tall. You can decide to add feet or inches or centimeters, whatever unit you want to add, you can add it down here and it will work. Now one final thing I'll talk about, then end the video in here. So giving something like the concatenation that we earlier spoke about. So let's say you want to concatenate weight and height. So let's say you are, so when you do the plus here and you give weight and you give height, what it does is, since this is a string, the first plus here is noted for concatenation, and this here turns into a string. So automatically the one that will follow will also be a concatenation, which is also a string. It will not add the two values for us. Let's run our project and see. So you can see it gives us the 12.5453 up to 12. Then this one also starts from 12 up to the 232 at the end. So this is how concatenation works in Java. The word is concat. I hope I spell it properly. No, my spelling is wrong. Yes, so this is its concatenation. So it is simply combining a string with another string, or a string with a variable. In anyways, it's still the same thing. So if you watch this video up to this place, then congratulations for completing the second part of Java. I'll be dropping the link for the source code in the description for you to go through it. The documentations will also be in the description, and I hope you have a clear understanding. If you have any problem, any confusion, any help, any personal one-on-one studies, you can contact me. My WhatsApp will be in the description, and I will attend to you as soon as possible. Thank you, and don't forget to subscribe and like the video to keep the channel running. Have a nice day.